Hey everyone, my name is Fan Fantasy, and today I'm happy to announce that we're starting a new interview series with Ron. And he was a Bradley crewman in the US Army, and he served in Iraq, Kosovo, and Albania. He's also one of my viewers of this channel. And so he's here with me to talk about the Bradley and also some stories. Hope you guys enjoy this and find this interesting. And if you like this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more of my content. And so now with me is Ron, and you can start off with telling us more about yourself.
Yeah, sure. I was it's kind of hard to, always hated this part, when someone's like, tell you about yourself. You're like, um, so let's see. I was born in Massachusetts. I joined the Army in 1993, my senior year in high school. I remember as a kid, I always wanted to be a soldier. I was the guy walking around in camo pants, and I was the one that knew all kinds of planes and different types of tanks and stuff like that. Um, Lived all around New England, growing up as a kid. Like I said, joined the Army in '93 under the delayed entry program.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know if you know what that is.
Nope.
Okay, in the U.S. Army, when you join the military, you sign up for an 8-year contract.
Hmm.
However many years active duty, and then whatever the makeup after that is your time you do in the reserves, National Guard, or inactive Ready Reserve. For high school kids, what will happen is you join what's called delayed entry program. You sign up the senior year of high school. And essentially what happens is you go into the inactive Ready Reserves. You take your oath of enlistment. You go down to the military entry center. You do all your stuff. You're in the military, but you are only responsible for the being at the recruiting station when they need you to be. Usually that's anywhere from it's up to about a year is what they'll usually keep you in the delayed entry program.
Hmm.
And so, I joined the Army, ended up going to Fort Benning, Georgia in 1994 in July. Talk about very interesting. Um, if you've ever been to Georgia in July, it's about 9,800 degrees with about 90% humidity.
So really hot.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Down here in the U.S., what happens is you sign up and you go down, you take your Army test, whatever, the ASVABs. Essentially what it does, it says what you're good at, what you would be bad at, gives you an assessment.
Of like trades and stuff, like best trades for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I scored very high in combat arms. So tanks,
Mm-hmm.
infantry, Bradley, stuff like that. Which also was ironic. I scored high in culinary arts.
Oh.
Go figure. But so I went down to what we call MEPS, the Military Entry Processing Station in Boston, Massachusetts. And after you do your physical and do all this stuff, and you get what the Army has to offer for jobs at that time. At the time, they were shorthanded on airborne supply and unassigned infantry. So those were my two options I had to sign up for. Even though I qualified for everything, that's just what the Army was short at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked the guy there, the career counselor, I said, well, what does supply do? He goes, well, you sign for a bunch of stuff, and if you lose any of it, you pay for it. I'm a
Oh.
17-year-old kid that couldn't keep track of his car keys. So I asked him, what does infantry do? He goes, you run through the woods, making a path a mile wide, mile long, and destroying anything in your way. I said, that's the job I want. So back then it was, there wasn't VHS. There was these disc things. I can't remember what they were called, big disc. And they put it in the player and they turned it on, and It told you what the four different jobs in the infantry were. Um, 11 Bravo, which is basic infantry.
Yep.
Uh, 11 Charlie, which is a mortarman, which is handheld field artillery, for
Mm-hmm.
lack of better terms. Um, 11 Hotel, which was an anti-armor infantryman. And then there was 11 Mike, which was mechanized infantry.
Mm.
Well, they put this disc in. They show this Bradley coming in. It's tearing over the, down through the woods, and the turret's sliding back and forth as the Bradley's driving. It's shooting. The coax, the machine gun's going off. The 25's going, and then the Bradley stops after kicking up all this dirt, and the ramp comes down. And these guys jump out the back and they start shooting everywhere. I was like, wow, that's what I want to do.
Mm.
So, um, the one thing about the U.S. Army is yes, I signed up for infantry,
Oh,
but
okay.
I was unassigned infantry. So what
Oh.
that means is, when you get down to Fort Benning, whatever they need is what you get assigned. So I could have been a light infantryman, I could have been a mortarman, uh, or I could have been anti-armor. But luckily, for me, I ended up mechanized. So essentially, what you do is you do what's called one station unit training. And what that is that is where you do your basic training and your advanced individual training for your job at one duty station. So in the case for infantry, it's Fort Benning, Georgia. Back in the 90s, armor or cavalry scouts went to Fort Knox, Kentucky. That was the home of the armor.
Right.
Um, and then you had Fort, can't remember, Oklahoma, Fort Sill, Oklahoma. That's where field artillery goes. Um, so essentially, what you do is you do your 8 weeks basic, and then whatever your school is.
Yep.
Um, so once you get done with that at Fort Benning, since I was mechanized infantry, we got a 2 week um, crash course, I guess would be for lack of better words, on the Bradley. At this time, what had happened was in '93, they'd had a Bradley rollover, and a soldier had got killed in training.
Oh no.
So at that time, what they did was they said, we're not the 29th Infantry Regiment that runs the Bradley training school at Fort Benning. The chain of command said, we're not going to have you guys do any more training. Prior to that, you would actually drive the Bradley, you would take it out and you would shoot the Bradley, live ammunition, and you would do maneuvers with the Bradley.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in my case, my class, we literally sat in uh, a bay with a Bradley, and we got to change, check the oil and check the coolant, and maybe rotate the turret around a little bit, and they told us, here's the manual, and taught us all about the manual, but that was about it.
Mm.
Um, so realistically, everything I learned um, fighting in mechanized infantry was all on the job training. Um, so
Were you supposed to be the infantry that's part of the Bradley, or were you supposed to be the crew, like the
okay,
driver and all?
so as an 11 Mike, you are a mechanized infantryman. Um, another name would be like a dragoon. Do you know what dragoons are?
Yep. Yep.
Mounted infantry. You ride on a horse back in the olden days, but you dismounted and fought as
Yep.
infantry. That's what mechanized infantry is essentially. So you could have been uh, part of the crew, driver, gunner, Bradley commander,
Mm-hmm.
or you could have been a dismounted soldier, a squad leader, team leader,
Right.
a machine gunner, whatever. Um, and essentially, what would happen is as you go through your career, when they still had 11 mics, which they don't have anymore, they did them away with.
Oh, okay.
11 Bravos now do the same job, light infantry. So there's only infantry in the army
Yeah.
now, except for the 11 Charlies, the Mortarmans. Um, but I know I'd read an article a couple months ago that the Army's thinking about coming out with a MOS just for Bradley crewmen now.
Oh,
You
so
know,
it's not a separate
no, it's
MOS. I see.
no, it's all one MOS.
Okay.
When you actually go back in the Army, in the U.S. Army, you go to Vietnam, and cavalry scouts and armored tankers were actually infantrymen back then.
Mm.
You had 11 Deltas and 11 Echoes, armored crewmen and infantry scouts. Early 80s, they switched them off to their own branch and made the cavalry branch.
Mm-hmm. For those who don't know, maybe you can tell us about the M2 Bradley.
Sure, the M2 Bradley was originally designed as a reaction um, or a counter to the Russian or Soviet BMP-1.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Prior to that, the idea of fighting mounted or from inside an armored vehicle didn't happen. You had the M113,
Yep.
um, but those are more, battlefield taxis, as they were called.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the Bradley was the first time the U.S. Actually was able to design a weapon system to where the crew could fight, assault, but then also drop off infantrymen and maneuver. I know a lot of people. There's a movie out there. It's called Pentagon Wars.
Yep.
I watched it back when I was a young private back at Fort Hood, and we were all sitting there going, "Oh my, wow, oh wow, this is what it really was like."
The politics behind
Realist,
it.
you know, when you dive deeper into the research, come to find out the colonel from the Air Force was he wasn't happy that he had the job, and some of the things that they did do, actually, they did take like sheep and put them into Bradleys and shoot them.
Oh,
Um,
like
but
live
at that
sheep?
time, yes,
Oh, okay.
and then shoot it with a sabo round and see what would happen to the inside. Come to find out, the original Bradley's armor, which is an aluminum alloy, the original armor, when hit with a Soviet sabo round, would cause a noxious gas, and it would actually kill everybody inside the vehicle.
Oh.
So they ended up going back and redesigning a little bit. Now, me, when I joined in '94, I was originally trained on, like I said, in basic training, the M2 Bradley.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually a couple of different variants, and I'm not just talking about the M2 and the M3. I'll talk about the M3, the cavalry version, in a little while.
Yeah,
But
sure. Talk about them.
you have the M2 Bradley, or the A0, which is the very first Bradley. Um, they came out, I want to say it was 81-ish. I can't remember off the top of my head. Um, and they were very lightweight. You could actually swim them, meaning you could actually erect a barrier around it, and you could actually put them into a river or pond or whatever and float them. And they actually could go like 2 or 3 miles an hour. The tracks would actually work as
Okay.
propellers. Um,
Are those the ones that you see in Gunner Heat PC? Is that the variant?
yes, yeah. The ones in those would be your M2 A0s.
Okay.
You can tell those by the when you look on the sides of the Bradleys. Um, they had very thin metal. You could literally just lift up by hand. just to cover the side skirt or the tracks, and we call them side skirts.
Hmm.
When you get later into the A2, the A2 ODS, the A3, those are now uh, they are changed over to two pieces of steel. So you couldn't just flip them up. It was something they'd learned from Kuwait in 91 during Operation Desert Storm,
Hmm.
that the side skirts just weren't enough. So it was something they needed to upgrade. Um, when I was in Iraq, we my my unit was lucky enough. We drew um, in Kuwait when we got there M2A2 ODS, which is Operation Desert Storms. And essentially, what this was these were an M2A2 Bradley that it had some things upgraded to them. Um, they had a laser rangefinder for the 25 millimeter. Um, they had a with laser rangefinder, you when you'd laze, it would give I think it's a 10-digit grid to every unit in the area of where that enemy was.
Mm.
Um, had some upgraded transmission, upgraded motor. They changed the type of a transmission from a linkage system to an electronic controlled. Um, and then the A3 version was you'd notice it has a commander's independent viewer,
Yeah.
which the commander has his own sight. That's a big giveaway on that system. But yeah, I was lucky enough when I was in my first duty station at Fort Hood. We had just M2A2 Bradleys, and those were a pain because back on those versions you had 6 seats in the back of the Bradley for the dismounts. So you literally sat in a seat, and when the ramp would come down and you would get out, you had to fold your seat down and then flip it up so that the guy behind you could get out because of the way the seats were arranged. With the ODS, they changed that to bench seats, so it made it a little bit easier.
Hmm.
So back to the M3s, the cavalry version. The difference between the infantry version and the cavalry version is the infantry version holds 7 and 9 dismounted infantrymen. The cavalry version only holds 2 dismounted / reloaders or scouts. Um, when I was at Fort Hood back in 94, 95, we actually had a company of 11 hotels that used M3 Bradleys for anti-tank roles, because the Cav Scout version hold, I want to say it's 11 or 12 tow missiles, whereas the Bradley, with the infantry version, I do believe we held 1, 2, 3 tows, maybe 4, depending if we had a Dragon or a Javelin.
What would you use the scout variant for? Like, what reason versus the infantry one?
Well, originally, I mean, the Scout variant was literally just that. 11th ACR, who was in Germany. ACR is an armored cavalry regiment, so that would be more towards the cavalry. So you'd have tanks and Bradleys working together
Hmm.
in the scouting role. And the cavalry version was literally just that. You would be a scout. Um, we used to joke with the guys all the time, is we'd call them, target reference points, TRPs,
Hmm.
because the Bradley's 8.5 feet tall. You're not sneaking and peeking anywhere with a Bradley. Um, Usually in mechanized infantry units, your scout platoon is actually in Humvees, up armored Humvees.
Yeah.
In a cavalry regiment, though, they're using cavalry fighting vehicles and M1 Abrams working together.
All right. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a bit about how they work.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, so what's your position in the Bradley?
Um, I personally I was mechanized infantry for 10 years. In that time, I've literally held every job you can uh, on a Bradley crew and in a dismounted squad. I was My first duty position was a M60 machine gunner. So I dismounted out of the back because I was the youngest private, and they gave me the heaviest gun.
Of course.
Exactly. It's like, oh, cool, great. It was great though. I'm carrying. I felt like Rambo. I'm carrying an M60 machine gun. It was awesome. Only problem was they didn't tell me that it was non-functioning because the last guy didn't know what he was doing and put it back together wrong.
Oh,
Oh yeah, I had to literally. Me and I worked with the company armor, um, the guy who's responsible for the maintenance on the weapons and storage of the weapons, and we completely rebuilt the gun from receiver all the way up. I learned really good learning experience. But after that, I was a Bradley driver. So my job was I literally drove it.
mhm.
Um, then after that, I left Fort Hood and I went to Korea. When I got there, I was a dismount again, but this time I was lucky. I got to carry the M203, M16, M203 combo. For those that don't know, an M203 is a 40 millimeter single shot grenade launcher.
Yep.
I carried that for a little while until they found out that I had experience with the M60 machine gun. And guess what? Well, here you go, Specialist Garnett. So this time I'd been in the Army for a while. So I was a senior guy in my company before being a non-commissioned officer. Um, Here you go. You're a senior guy. Great. I carried that for a couple of months, and then I ended up becoming a Bradley driver again. Left Korea, went to Germany. Um, Mind you, so I was in Texas for 2 years, a year in Korea. I did 2 years in Germany. While I was in Germany, I was a Bradley gunner. So that meant I was responsible for maintenance of the turret, the 25 millimeter, the M 240 Charlie, the coaxial 7.62 machine gun. And then also I was in charge of the driver, meaning when we did maintenance, I made sure he did all the good stuff.
Mhm.
Um, then I ended up becoming a dismounted team leader for a little while, meaning I was in charge of three other infantrymen. Um, then I was in Germany. Uh, I deployed to Kosovo. Um, in that time, we'll talk about deployments later. Um, but after that, I ended up going to Fort Stewart, Georgia, and I was offered the job to go work in the brigade, which is the headquarters element or regimental headquarters, essentially. And at that time, I thought it was, oh, okay, I'll do this. I'll get away from the infantry. I can relax. No, that was a bad idea. I worked harder in that admin job than I did when I was down as an infantryman. But so then I ended up going back down to back down to an infantry unit. And again, I was a Bradley, a gunner, but I was the platoon leader, the lieutenant's gunner.
Mm.
So when the platoon leader would dismount with the infantry, I would take over and become the Bradley commander, and I would have an alternate gunner if I was lucky. So I've literally done every job. Um, After I left Fort Stewart, I went to Hawaii and ended up being light infantry, which is a total different animal.
Yep. So what was your favorite position and your least?
Well, my least favorite was being when I worked for the brigade operations sergeant major.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I was not a fan of being. I thought it was a
Paperwork.
great time. No, it wasn't so much paperwork. It was I was the brigade radio transmission officer, or RTO operator.
Okay.
So I was the guy on the radio, and I had to keep track of where everybody was and battle tracking and stuff like that. I got to learn a lot of why you do things down at the lower levels that most guys never get to see.
Hmm.
My favorite job, that's a tough one. I'd probably say if I was on a crew, would be the gunner. Gunner is a blast. Besides doing actually the gunnery stuff, when you're actually shooting the 25 and actually having, doing that, blast. As a dismount, I'd say being a team leader or an M60 gunner was the most favorite.
Hmm.
Um, as a team leader, you're right there. That's, to me, that is the epitome of being a leader. Um, you're the one that's you have three guys. You're the lowest level, non-commissioned officer, but you're the what's what I'm looking for here. Um, Even though you're the lowest level leader, you're the one that can make so much go right or go wrong, if that makes
Right.
sense.